You're listening to WorkWire, sponsored by Career Club and SHRM. Career Club has a range of services aimed at job seekers with an empathetic approach. Whether you are a job seeker yourself, know someone who is in job search, or an HR professional looking to bring a more empathetic approach to transitioning employees, check out career.club. If you are an HR professional seeking to enhance your skills, subscribe to SHRM and explore their extensive resources. Visit shrm.org. That's shrm.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The WorkWire. I am Bob Goodwin, the president of Career Club, and I'm joined by my good friend, the president and CEO of SHRM, Johnny C. Taylor Jr. Johnny, how are you?
I am doing really well. I mean, if I were doing any better, I would have won that $1 billion lottery a couple of weeks ago.
No, my line is I'm better than I deserve, and that is true every morning. So it's great to see you, though.
That's right. It's good to be seen, my man, and really good to see you. Where are you these days?
I am in Cincinnati, Ohio for the time being, but I may be going somewhere warmer sometime soon. But we won't tell anybody about that. That will be our secret, okay?
Well, let me just tell you this. Yesterday, I was in the Bahamas. I was in Nassau for 20 hours, I might add. I had to fly in. I gave a talk to the SHRM Nassau chapter, or actually Bahamas more broadly. All of the islands came together and we talked human capital, HR, and all the like. So it was a lot of fun. And I thought about you, but I had to jump on a plane. I literally got there one night at about 10 o'clock and I was back on a plane at 4 the next day. So,
oh my God. Well, we'll get you down there and you'll spend a little bit more time. How about that?
That's it. I love it.
All right. So we're going to have a fairly somber topic today to kind of get kicked off. The events of October 7th in Israel were shocking, to say the least, and horrific. And yet it's identified actually some divisiveness in the country, in the world, in the reaction to this. And one of the places that's most been evidenced is on college campuses. And almost immediately on college campuses, Harvard, notably NYU, and then obviously lots of others.
Brandeis.
Yep. I mean, there was very anti-Israel sentiment. And even at Harvard, there was, I think, 34 student organizations signed some document basically condemning Israel and taking a very pro-Palestinian, as they were defining themselves, stance on what had happened literally just hours before. It wasn't that long that it had happened. And yet, college campuses have always been places of protest, discussion of ideas. That's sort of the beauty of a university, should be the free exchange of ideas. Core to the U.S. is the freedom of speech and to be able to have opposing points of view and open discussion. So at that level, that's who we are. That's just very deep in the DNA of us as a country. However, given the nature of what had happened over there, we don't need to go into the detail. I think everybody's read the news and they know what happened over there. Bill Ackman, who is the founder of Pershing Square Capital, billionaire, and a Harvard grad, as it turns out, said he wanted a list of all the students who belonged to any of the groups who signed the petition, or whatever that document would have been called, that was condemning Israel and coming out in support of Hamas. And the quote was, "It's not harassment to seek to understand the character of candidates you're considering for employment." So what he was saying is, I want to know who all these people are because I'm not hiring them. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, this is a WorkWire topic if ever there was.
If ever there was.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Man, you've described it, and the list goes. The more prestigious, higher ranked institutions are the ones where the headlines are written about. But let me tell you, it's everywhere. I saw also John Huntsman.
Yep.
His family, the Huntsman family, who has for years been huge supporters of the University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton School, have said, done. We will not give you another penny. Yep. And so it's just going on. And the wake effect of this in the broader community is alive and real. And it's now starting to play itself into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. We'd be naive to believe that it would start in higher ed and remain
Right.
in higher ed. As you pointed out, Bill and others have now said, no, this is going to come to work. And there's this really interesting tension that we have, and we've always had, Bob, with freedom of speech. First of all, it's not absolute. And it's never been absolute. The lawyer in me knows that, people throw off, I can say what I want. Well, the Supreme Court in its earliest days has said, even in the face of a First Amendment, there are other considerations to take into factor when you open your mouth. So, for example, one cannot, yell fire in a crowded movie theater without consequence. And the courts have said that, so this idea that it's unfettered, that you say whatever you want to whomever you want, whenever you want, is not an accurate reflection. It's people who've not taken their time to actually study one of the foundational premises of this republic. So, but then move past that. Even when you move away from those things that are actually causing harm to people, then we get into conversations like, would it be right, just because you have the freedom of speech, to support slavery? It's not just those situations where you're talking about burning, yelling fire in a crowded building, but we have not been a society that's particularly tolerant of people saying things, hate speech, for example. We have made exceptions for hate speech. We've said you will be arrested criminally and there will be civil consequences as well for uttering hate speech. Just because you believe that and that you have a freedom of speech does not mean you can do that. So what we're trying to do is to figure out what the boundaries actually are for people who sort of naively thought that you could say whatever you want. So that's the start of it, is people are trying to figure it out. The second thing, though, that we're struggling with is, we talk about the value of diversity of viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And we believe that we all embrace diversity. And what we're coming to find is what people want is diversity as long as they agree with it.
Right.
It's not true diversity. If you literally, we're seeing instances where now, if you don't condemn one side or the other, then people don't agree with you. So it's bad enough to say, I'm just going to say, I am a supporter of Israel in this situation, or I'm a supporter, conversely, of Palestine. Well, no, now it's not that I just don't agree with you. You're bad, because you are supposed to condemn certain behaviors. And so we've thrown out the window this whole idea of diversity of thought. And you and I've talked about this quite a lot, right? And so it's there, and I know I'm not conflating diversity of thought and hate speech. I fully get that. So anyone listening, I'm not doing that. What I am saying is that we are struggling as not just a country, but as a broader society, global society, with how do we deal with the notion of people disagreeing, having different points of view on a topic, and how do you reconcile that in the United States with this prized right that we have to say what you want to say within reason. So there you are. I'm really feeling it in the workplace now, because people are deciding with whom they're going to work or not, based upon that person's position on this topic. I'm hearing about that.
So we both work at the same company. And I'm like, I ain't working with Johnny because right. I don't agree with him on this topic or some other topic. So I'm not going to be on that team or on that project or whatever. Wow.
And it's an extension of what you and I've talked about a lot, which is politics at work.
Yeah.
And this was the danger. I think you and I talked about this on a former WorkWire, where we said, listen, you can openly, under federal law in the United States, say, I'm not going to hire someone because they're a Democrat and I'm a Republican. That you can do that. And while that sounds interesting, and the analogous situation is the one that we're right in, I don't know how healthy that is, because that is now taking us down. So this slippery slope that we talked about back then is now on full display, where people are saying, I will not work with, and going to the business leaders are saying, worse than I won't work with you, I won't hire you. And we're going to see instances where people are being fired for doing it, which is yet another. I mean, think about the consequences of all of this. So, yeah, this is the topic of the day, but it unearths a bigger problem. We are such a polarized and divided world, not society, but world in the United States and abroad. It's just tragic.
Well, and picking up on your notion of it's not enough that we disagree, but you're now a bad person. The word evil gets thrown around very loosely now. Those are evil people, but then also you're not, a true believer. Like unless you're willing to like get extreme all the way to the point of violence, right? Because otherwise you're not really a true believer. But let's I want to zoom in and we can zoom back out some more. But since you kind of started off on a legal foundation, which I really appreciate to get people level set on free speech is not absolutely free, is just legally, can Bill Ackman say, hey, you guys that were part of that, I'm just out there, we would not hire you. And that's okay?
Yes. Hands down, there are, first, and those of us who are listening know that in the United States, the standard, with the exception of one or two states, is at will employment.
Yep.
So in many ways, you can fire someone just because you don't like the color of their shirt.
But I can't fire you because of the color of your skin.
Right. So the exceptions are religion, or we call it creed, race, color, national origin, those kinds of things. But other than that, if essentially I don't like your opinion on anything, I can fire you. You work here because you want to work here and because I want you to work here. And at any point, you are free to walk away and I'm free to walk away. Now, for those who listen, of course, if you have a contract, and that could be a labor contract or whatever, there could be contractual limitations on that. But by and large, employers can do whatever they want to do.
Can I, though, sue the employer and say, but you are unfairly biasing against me because for some reason?
If that bias were illegal, again, if you could make the argument that you discriminated against me because I am a member of a particular religious group, for example, if I'm Jewish and I can prove that I was discriminated against because I was Jewish, yes. But if you were discriminated against or fired because you took a position that the company's leader did not agree with, then that's free game. I mean, that's, and there's some nuance in there. I want to make sure. I mean, there's all sorts of real subtle legal arguments that one can make, but at its core, the basic idea is yes, an employer, if you decide that I'm going to go and make a statement pro-Israel or pro-Palestine or Gaza, yes, your employer can fire you.
What if that is under the guise of that's my religious belief? You're discriminating because I'm Muslim and I think those guys are in the wrong and I'm saying it.
Now, that's where it does get nuanced, and I could go a whole show on that, and we should bring on Lori to talk about that. But what I'll tell you is there is a way to argue. And look, and think about it. There's a way to say, if an employer fired someone for wearing Black Lives Matter, T-shirts or what have you at work 3 years ago, when that was the term, the employer could do that. And some employers have said, absolutely, we will not have any of those sorts of positions, people wearing that stuff at our office. You've got to prove that you therefore had a policy that banned it all, right? Or otherwise it is selective enforcement based upon the race of the person. So you can kind of get there if you wanted to, but, and I don't want to get deep down to it, but let me state, generally speaking, the employer has a right publicly to say, if you make these statements, or worse, if you make what I believe are statements inconsistent with our culture, whatever that culture is, then I can fire you or refuse to hire you.
In pre-employment due diligence, background checking, whatever you want to call it, is reviewing someone's social media fair game?
Yeah, and that's what you're doing. You're spot on, Bob. That's what that's what I'm hearing more than anything. In some ways, you love the organization that says point blank, this is the position that we're going to take. what employees should be concerned about, or prospective employees and applicants should think about, is increasingly we're determining before you even get an interview if we're going to interview you based upon a surveillance, if you will, or of what you've been doing online. So you make that statement, we look at it and say, this isn't the kind of person we want in our organization. They may or may not tell you. In fact, most of the time you won't know why you didn't get that call back. So I warn folks, I said, listen, as you said it, speech is not free. There are consequences that will flow from it. And maybe you don't care about those. And maybe, and as I would actually think about it, then maybe you don't want to work for that organization if you're not aligned with who you are, right? Maybe maybe they did you a benefit, right?
Yeah, I felt like I was channeling my inner Johnny on this, where it's like, you say you want to bring your whole self to work. Do you really? Do you really?
Right.
Because I was thinking about some other topics, Johnny, and again, I felt like I was channeling you in some of this. It's like, okay, well, let's pick some other topics and see, how an employer might view that, pro union. So like all the stuff that's been going on in the auto industry right now, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm all for UAW, and now you're applying for a job at a non-union company. It's like, don't think we need that firebrand here.
That's right. Now the difference is there's something called National Labor Relations Act, which says you cannot be discriminated against based upon your support or non-support of a union. So that at least there are laws that will specifically attack those things.
That's an interesting one, yeah.
But but I love it. But you're right. Here's the deal: if I'm an employer, without saying anything to you, if I go online, as many of us are doing these days, as we think about applicants, to see how that person shows up. If I see some red flags, I'm not going to tell you, I heard you made these pro-union statements and we don't believe that, so I'm not going to hire you. You just don't get the return call. Right. And I know there are folks who are probably saying, oh my God, I can't believe that's so illegal. It is, but it's only illegal if you can prove it and if you know that that's the basis for it. What we've been talking about when we talk specifically about what's happening in our world right now between Israel and Palestine is, in this unique instance, yes, employers can openly say, not having you here.
Okay.
I'm withdrawing an offer that I made to you. And
that's what happened to Rena Workman, the NYU law student, and she had, from a very prestigious law firm, said, no,
not so much. And it'll be interesting to see how she responds to that, because then it's not just one firm, it's several firms. And here's an interesting tension that I don't think people have thought about fully, is while I appreciate her, and I'm not saying this is me, I'm saying this is the discussion. While it's great, everything that you think doesn't have to be said. And so they're looking at it more from the standpoint of she just exercises poor judgment. It's almost not, I believe their position is, I don't agree with her and therefore I'm not going to hire her. But the real question for me as an employer would be, do I want someone to come into my workplace who has such poor judgment? You can hold your own sincere beliefs about anything, but is it really good for you to broadcast them all over social media or traditional media, or just like, is that what I need in an already polarized work environment?
And what does that do to my brand as an employer, as a company?
And just my overall culture. Like, do I want the person who thinks that? Because there are a lot of things. Come on, Bob. You and I think a lot of things about a whole bunch of stuff. Every one of us has those thoughts in our minds.
We also have filters.
Right. You have filters that say there are consequences to me saying this. So even my grandmother, 8th grade education, used to tell me, you can be right, but you can be dead right. When I'd talk about, I'd walk up to a street pole and want to walk across the street in front of moving traffic. And I'd say, I got the right of way. And she says, you're going to be dead right, because you can be right. There is a legal right to walk out in front of these cars, and these cars are supposed to stop. But in practice, it is not good judgment, and there could be serious consequences if you walk out in the front of traffic.
Let's think about some other topics, though, that would be very current. One's kind of silly, but others aren't. Decriminalization of drugs, right? Yep. So, like, hey,
Can,
I'm very, pro legalization of marijuana. Actually, I got past that a while ago. I'm pro psychedelics, and I
right.
think that's actually a mental wellness issue, and like we should just make psychedelics legal. In
Can,
Ohio, as you and I are recording this episode, um, abortion is on the agenda, and
right.
you obviously we have people that are extremely passionate. And to my earlier point, sometimes you're not a true believer unless you're willing to go to the hey, we should be burning down abortion clinics. This is the worst. Like, and if you're on Facebook or whatever social media platform, like aligning yourself with extreme views, like
Yes.
people like be cognizant. I mean, not trying to get anybody to not live out your values, be courageous, say what you think, whatever. Just know that somebody's going to be looking at that and deciding you may not be a great fit here. That's not what we want at our company. And that free speech isn't free. There's a cost.
And listen, if you're talking about the fringes of anything, we all agree as employers, you kind of don't want that in your workplace. You tolerate it where you have to under the law, but where the law doesn't reach to it, we don't want it. So it's one thing to say to someone during an interview, I want the diversity of opinion. I have some people who believe in abortions, some who don't believe in the right to an abortion, and others who don't feel that way. That's fine. We're okay with that. But if you're the person who says all over social media, people who have abortions kill and should go to hell and should do this and do,
Right.
you've now crossed over having a point of view that all of us can respect into really bad divisive language. And so when you start doing that, then I realize I don't think that it's good for you to be in my workplace. Again, I have that choice and you have that choice, but I'm making that decision. Now, if you're making arguments that I'm, in the context of your religious beliefs, again, an employer has to be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
You can't discriminate against someone for holding a sincerely held religious belief. But even that person can't go to the extreme of promoting violence against people who don't hold it, because now they've crossed into a different space. So yeah, it's all here. But I think if we really step back and zoom back, we're at a tipping point. We're at a tipping point because we're trying to figure out how to at once give people the right to be individuals, right? The Constitution is based in individual rights as a country, and then balance that with ensuring that people don't come into openly hostile environments at work.
Yeah.
And if you and I talk a lot about this phrase, people say, I want full transparency. And I've always said, I
No,
don't
you
like it.
don't.
I don't even, you don't want full transparency. And I want to bring my authentic self to work. No, you don't, because that means your colleague who's a member of the KKK can walk in and be their authentic self at work. You don't want that either. So we have to be careful with these absolute, I can say whatever I want because of freedom of speech. I want full transparency. I want to bring my authentic self to work. I want to bring my whole self. No, not even that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bring that self to work, you better sure as hell figure out how to manage that self at work, because there are other people around and it's not all about you, which is the topic you and I explored, oh gosh, a couple of months back. We've moved ourselves into a society where people believe that it is all about them. They can say what they want, think what they want, do what they want. And that is not good for a society. It's not good for a long-term society, I can assure you.
Yeah, so shout out to my friend Hunter Thurman and his firm Alpha Diver, because what you're talking about is the zeitgeist. There's actually four different kinds of zeitgeist, if you will. And the one that we're in right now that is just so pronounced is individualism, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we'll pick this up on another episode on another day, but it's going to turn. It always turns because these things are plotted out over decades, and it
Yes.
will turn. But right now, you nailed it, Johnny. That's exactly where we're at, and it is very, very polarized. And so I want to go back to what you said, because it's probably the biggest frame that we can put this conversation in, which is diversity versus divisiveness, and how we can disagree without being disagreeable. And you made a great point about the NYU lady, in that the judgment, it's not even your position on this issue, it's the
Right.
volume on something. So can I see that person working in a collegial, cooperative, respectful way at my company? Or is she just going to keep rolling hand grenades under the conference table, right? And it's
Well,
like don't need that. Like, I need people that work towards solutions, not work towards self promotion, or just being as extreme as you can be on. Like, that's not a good quality. And we talked about company culture and stuff like that, and it's like, well, the company gets to choose how they want to build that culture. And I think you say it well. Culture is how stuff gets done, and if stuff
right.
gets done that way, probably not a good fit.
Now, I will say I would like to have not seen, this is personally, right? I would like to have not seen or create an environment where there's a litmus test where you can only work here if you agree with me. So I'm going to take the other side now.
Yes.
From an employer perspective, we have to be really careful where it isn't the boss decides what is right and wrong in the world. So, and I'm not saying Bill and others, John Huntsman say, I'm not saying they said that. So I don't want to put words in the mouth, but we always as employers have to be careful with the idea that we do want a marketplace of ideas and you don't want groupthink. That is the benefit of diversity. So we're not saying don't hire people unless they pass the litmus test. Do you believe that the Israelis are right? And that's a gating issue for you. And like, you don't want that either. You can go too far there as well. What we're getting to is the how. I think all of us are willing to tolerate and understand different points of view. We're saying, but you can't do it in a divisive way. And there are people who would argue, well, yes, you can, and maybe you should, because that's the only way progress is made. I get that argument too. I do understand that. But we as employers have to be very careful where we are not exercising our will too strongly. I can tell you as a CEO, there are times when I have employees who say things that I violently disagree with, right? And I look at them and I can't help it to say, gosh, I don't even like that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based upon what they said. But I've got to exercise enough restraint to say, we have to be in an environment where everyone doesn't agree with me. And that's the other side of it, right? And I am worried that we could take this too far on the employer side as well and have a chilling effect, or get just an echo chamber environment where you're only surrounded with people who see the world the way you do. That's dangerous as well.
Right. And a theme that you come back to a lot, which I really appreciate, which is inclusion, right?
Right.
So yes, it's diversity, but it's inclusion, so that I can express something in the right way, and not be ostracized, or worse, for, like, well, we have to let him go because he doesn't agree with us. No, we need to be inclusive, and allow people to express themselves. Otherwise, diversity is just demographic bingo, and I'm not sure that advances anything. But just again, I think that something that we talk about a lot on this is diversity is good. Diversity with inclusion is the goal. But when it gets to be extreme, and I love how you said that, it's how this comes to life, not that it should come to life. So, anything else, Johnny? I want to be respectful of the time.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I would just say this. I think at the end of the day, this is, yes, it bothers me where we are at this point in our country. And you have talked about it. We're as diverse as we've ever been, and we're as divided as we've ever been. And this worries me. But I love this zeitgeist moment argument that you're making. Sometimes you have to go through this to get to the other side
That's exactly
of
right.
where we're going. I do believe that. And so what gives me comfort is conversations like this, and those who are listening right now to this podcast. If if you try to figure it out, and it's art, as much art as it is science, where you want to have divergent opinions and perspectives, while at the same time keeping people within some box, because you just can't have people doing whatever they want and operate a good culture. So, and I don't like good or bad, but a healthy culture, right? So just we as leaders have an obligation now to figure out how to get that balance right. Admittedly tough, but that's what management's about. None of it's easy.
Well, and I think just in the mission of SHRM, this is about humans and understanding humans, and like this is the art part of the whole thing. Is like it's one thing to talk about, it's another thing to actually execute on it, and people are endlessly complex, and there's not a simple answer to a very complex problem.
That's right.
Awesome.
Indeed.
Johnny, so good to see you today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening today. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for that. Please do subscribe and like and comment. Same with the podcast platforms, rate, review, subscribe. But we really appreciate you investing a few minutes with us today. And Johnny, as always, I'm just always blessed to see you. So thank you.
Likewise, Bob, and thank you for taking on such a thorny topic, because a lot of folks would have run away from this. Well, and I really love that you ran right into it. And I think, and I hope that the feedback is that we handled it respectfully, thoughtfully, and with one really important goal here is that we had pure intent. Our goal was actually not to judge one way or the other, but to make us all be more thoughtful as we go about our management practices next week at work.
As always, well said, Johnny. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Check out career.club for personalized help with your job search. Visit shrm.org to become part of the largest human resources organization worldwide.